Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where you meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. This is the 57th episode of the Shipping Podcast. Hello there, shipping podcast lovers. Welcome back. This time I'm going to introduce you to Marthe Lamp Sandvik, COO of Lorentzen and Stemoco AS in Oslo. Marthe was in Gothenburg on the 19th of January this year. She was going to deliver a keynote speech, and I asked her if she could come into my office and make an interview after she made her keynote, and she did. Marthe has a really interesting background, and she's really fit to be a tanker shipbroker, with a background of having lived in Syria for a year during the Arab Spring in 2010. I think she will tell you the story herself, and I'm sure you're going to be as interested of oil prices, oil, tankers, and so on after having listened to Marthe. So, without further ado, this is Marthe Lamp Sandvik for you. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Marthe Lamp Sandvik. I work as the COO in Lorentzen Stemoco. We're a shipbroker headquartered out of Oslo, with offices in Asia and all over Europe, and also in New York.
How many employees are there?
We're around 55, 60 now.
So how did you end up in shipping? What is your background?
Do you want the long story?
Yes,
or the
please.
short story?
I want the long story so I can cut out.
It's a long series of strange events, to be honest. I studied Arabic and political science at university, and my plan was to be a Middle Eastern correspondent. And then I went to Syria. So I was studying Arabic at the University of Damascus for a year. It was supposed to be, but we had to leave in March, April, in the Arab Spring. So that was a wonderful year and a very, very interesting experience. Coming back from that, I think I saw that Middle Eastern correspondent probably wasn't what I was supposed to be doing after all. And I had 1 year left of university and was very unsure where to go next. So I got the good tip. So what do you want to do? And I said, I want to work fast pace. I want to work in a field where, there's a lot of humor, but also, which is quite challenging. And I want to work towards the Middle East with the knowledge that I have about that region, but I also want to add to the economy of Norway. I want to go home. And at that point, I'd been abroad for 7 years. I also did my high school abroad in Italy, so it felt like it was time to go home. And I did a 3-year degree on top of my master's in shipping administration. And then someone said, you should try going to a brokerage. And that was a good idea. Yeah.
So where are we in time? When did you start?
This is 3-4 years ago, actually. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you do in your job, in your everyday job?
Well, I started as an analyst. I've been a tanker analyst for quite a few years and been in charge of that for the company, which has been absolutely brilliant. And after having done that for a while, I was, loving it. But at the same time, it's about, you see all the movements in the market. You see everything that's happening in the market, but you don't get to see the company side of it. So you can say this much oil is going out of the U.S. This is much. These trade lanes are changing, but you're not seeing how that's actually affecting the bottom line of this and this and this company, and why it's changing the bottom lines of different companies in the same sector in different ways. So it comes down to that sort of more overlooking thing. So I wanted to do more administrative operations in a way or that sort of analysis to find out that. And then I was suddenly offered this opportunity to go in as COO in the company, or that was a new position. And that was a challenge that I thought, why not? Let's try.
So could we talk a little bit about the tanker market as such, for people who doesn't know anything about it?
Yeah.
What are the different drivers in a tanker market?
Well, it's when you talk about the tanker market, it's a lot of different sectors within that market. And where I started, or what I focused on, was the crude tankers, the big ones. The VLCC, the very large crude carriers, the Suezmaxes, the Aframaxes. These are the big workhorses that carry crude oil from different ports around the world to demand centers. After that, you have what we call product tankers or clean tankers, and they're smaller and they're like the crude tankers, but they have a coating on the inside because they carry refined products most of the time. So gasoline and different clean petroleum products. And below that again, you have the third segment that I would study, and that's when you get into the more chemical liquids. And that's also more sophisticated vessels with even different coatings on the side to safeguard the vessel and interior.
So you got the crude oil, that is what's carrying the oil into the refinery.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's the products that is carrying it out from the refinery.
Yeah.
And then you got the chemicals. What kind of chemicals is carried in a chemical tanker?
Oh, it can be anything. Well, you have sort of three main groups. Veg oil, which is vegetable oil, so everything from olive oil to sunflower, soy, different types of oils. And palm oil is a big one. And then you have the inorganics. This is a lot of fertilizers. They're very, very tough chemicals. They're very corrosive. So usually you have to have a stainless steel chemical carrier to keep the vessel itself safe from that corrosive chemical. And then you have organic chemicals, which is what we get. Petrochemicals is what we get from fossil fuels. So from crude oil and natural gas, and these that also comes out of the refinery process and from different types of crackers. And it's there's so many different chemicals. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of different types of chemicals that we use in our day-to-day life, and we don't even think about it. It's everything from plastic to what you're wearing to it's absolutely everything, and it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. That is why I asked you, because I know a little bit about it. You know everything about it, but I know a little bit about it, that we actually use chemicals in so many things.
I don't think we realize how much of what we're using day to day is actually petroleum. If you look around, how much has in one state of its production line been crude oil or gas. It's a lot.
And I haven't been working in the different markets, but from the outside or semi-outside, it's always like the tanker market is the tough market. That's where the cowboys are and so on. Is that true?
I don't know. Yes and no. I think perhaps it used to be like that, and for most of the owners that I met, I would say it's changing a little bit. I don't think I've met that many cowboys in that sense.
Okay.
It's very professional. It's a very tough market. On the commercial side, it's very competitive. So you have to be very professional. You have to build the relationships, and it's extremely competitive. So it's a very challenging market. So if we're talking about cowboys, I think it's more in the hours they put into it, because it's a tough one.
Oh, I can understand that. So if we turn it around, then the clients is the oil companies. And who is the clients when it comes to chemicals?
It depends where in the production line you are. So it can be the big chemical producers who are chartering and sending this out, or it could be, for example, in the case of methanol, it can be Chinese MTO plants. So a plant that's making olefins that is then turned into plastic. That can be a client or a buyer of that methanol from another chemical plant, and it's there's so many steps in that supply chain that it's very hard to just say clients, the charters look like this, or the yeah.
And it might differ depending on where you are globally as well, geographically.
I think so. It depends on the production facilities that are available in that region. So you have obviously some regions have more advantageous feedstocks than others, and if you have like the US, if you have abundance of cheap natural gas. It's your feedstock for making chemicals is cheaper. So there's going to go more chemicals finished out of the US. But that wasn't the case in before, in the 1990s. That business was basically dead. It's a lot tougher for the competition. You're doing it, refining naphtha and a very high oil price. It was the competitive advantage is where sort of you get the trade flows in that business.
So, and you always keep your eye on the oil price.
It's a big factor there as well. Absolutely, and in multiple ways, because the oil price affects. Going back to what I was saying at the beginning, you start with the crude oil tankers and the product tankers, and then you have the chemical tankers. And you have to see these three segments as connected downwards. They are connected markets, so in two ways, the oil price will affect the earnings on the demand side and the investment rates on different projects, and whether it's worth going forward with, and whether you in the future will get product from that plant, and etc. etc. And it will move often the different prices that are tied to crude in relations. But at the same time, on the supply side, in the chemical tanker market, the oil price, as it was now, if the oil price comes from, isn't because of low demand, as it was now in 2015 when the market was high, you had a lot of supply, but demand was still good. And then you had a low oil price and people were just buying more and more and more. So the crude oil tankers were doing brilliantly on the earnings side. And then you had product tankers that decided to take crude oil instead because they could make more that way than doing petroleum products or clean products. So they were moving product vessels out of that fleet, and then there was less competition for those vessels again, and they kept moving it. This trickles down, what we call swing tonnage, and it trickles down to the chemical market. Because then you have these product tankers that are actually IMO certified to carry chemicals. They move out to the chemical market. So there's less competition for the cargoes, and the earnings improve. So it's the oil prices, in various ways, it impacts the market on both sides, both the demand and supply side.
I understand that as well then.
So it was terribly, very poorly explained.
No, I don't think so. I think you have to do it sort of, people have to get one puzzle here and one puzzle there and then put it together.
It's a tricky market. I don't think I've, I remember starting to study it. It's about basically drawing up maps, and saying these are the foundation blocks. This is where you start. And then you have so many derivatives that comes out of everything, and it's and where the end users can be a supply chain miles away. And it's you start with something you had no idea would end up in that sort of product, and it's everything, a toothbrush, to a tire, to absolutely everything, to your jumper, to your carpet, or it's paint.
But what about this green shipping that we are now, everyone is talking about or have been talking about for a couple of years? Is that affecting the tanker market? I mean, some people say, oh yeah, now we won't be using any fossil fuel anymore, which I don't really think. But
I think predominantly the way we can see what we can call green shipping affecting the tanker market going ahead is through the changing regulations. And when owners, through regulations, have to have new ballast water treatment systems, and they have to either go with low sulfur fuel or scrubber systems, this is going to have changes on our fleet, on the tanker fleet as a whole. And that's the primary change we're going to see now. There's a lot of numbers going around, but if there are very high investment costs related to these items or these systems on board your vessel, it's there has to be a decision. If it's how old is that vessel? How long can you trade it? How much are you going to get back of that investment? And in the current market, that it's getting quite oversupplied. It's I think that we will see more scrapping going ahead, and that is going to change. That's going to change our market. So it starts there.
What is it like to be a young woman in the shipping industry?
I think it's very different, I think, from where you work to what you do. Obviously, the broker industry is quite heavily male-dominated. And I think that's a shame. I think it is. Now, I think it has a lot to do with when I talk to young women who are just out of university or who are looking to transfer businesses or something, they don't really know what we do. And we're terribly bad at marketing ourselves. So bad. I mean, so it's very, very difficult to get that new blood in and get that new generation in. And the age-old story, you have to know someone. That's how you know the business, because you have a mother or a father or an uncle or someone who's told you what this is about, and that's how you got the interest for it. And it's, but at least on the broker side in Norway, I feel we're terribly bad at marketing ourselves to graduates and to outside people outside our industry. And I think there's also a perception that brokerage is a very sort of male-dominated and tough business, and to a sense that is true, but how tough you are, it really hasn't that much to do with your gender. So I think it's just the way it looks, but it's not the way it is. Yeah.
But it wasn't the case with you that you had an uncle or a mother or a father?
No, I just I got a good tip. So I think this is for you, and it was right fit straight away.
So you got the bug now. You won't leave the business.
Yeah. Did you get that feeling where you just know you landed correctly? This is it, and you wake up and you're excited to go to work, and you. I was driving past work one day with my sister. We were coming back from a weekend trip to London, and said, "That's my job." She's like, "Yes, such a nerd." She doesn't work in shipping. She doesn't get it.
But how do you think?
It's a luxury.
How do you think the shipping industry could become more visible?
Well, I think we have to market ourselves. I do. I think we have to be better at showing. I can only speak directly for the brokers, and I think they have a long way to go. We have to be better at marketing ourselves, but it's in your day-to-day job when it's busy, and because what we're actually talking about is the different types of recruitment, and it's when you're still getting that much. There is still so much interest coming, but it's people who already know, and it's not that much from young women, and I would love to see more. I would love that.
Yeah, I think we are in a paradigm where everything is changing. It has been changing for a while, but also we get new types of jobs, new jobs. That is, maybe we want to have another profile of the person that we are recruiting than the one that either had that job before or a new kind of position where you need something else to bring to the table.
I think that's very, very true, and it was mentioned today as well. We're in for a market with shorter cycles, and I agree with this. And it's partly due because there is greater flexibility and greater volumes of everything in the market. There are more vessels, there is more finance. Everything goes in these big waves of being available or unavailable, and it's creating sort of more dramatic cycles at the moment. And you have to be lean and flexible in order to have the correct approach to that, in my opinion. And it means that you don't necessarily know what sort of jobs you need 5 years from now. Now, you don't know what the demand is going to be. You don't know what kind of people you need in 10 years from now. And it's a lot about how we as an industry actually, how do we work to make sure that we attract the talent and the brain power we need for the future. And this is something that when there's so many people who would fit so well into our industry, I'm absolutely convinced of that, and they don't get the information to even sort of start thinking about it. We're losing out on so much, and I'm not sure that we can afford that. So I think we should be more aggressive in going out there.
Yes, because the only thing we know is that we don't need the same kind of people that we have been needing for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
No industry do that.
Everything's changing.
But the jobs are changing, and we have the digitalization coming up, and everything is going to be done in a different way. So maybe we need other skills.
Yeah.
But the people recruiting, not all of them have realized that maybe we need another profile of people, and maybe we need to make ourselves sort of build a brand of shipping in a way. I tried to ask people about that.
I think it's sometimes you have this subconscious bias that it's easier to hire someone that is more like yourself, and that's not necessarily a very good thing always. I think you lose out a lot on that. And again, it's impossible to know what sort of jobs you will need, because that would mean recruiters would have to be fortune tellers, and none of us are. But when you're seeing, what I really like is that all these, especially the owners that are coming now and taking the chances, and that are putting up new departments, that are digital departments, and just taking a chance. And when you're doing that, you're investing in the future in a poor market. That's a tough call, and that's something that's tough to sell, to you upstairs. And it's, I think that's very impressive. The ship owners that are doing this, and it witnesses a sort of faith in the future as well, because you have no idea what the return on that investment, if any, is going to be, and it's very, very inspiring.
Yeah, and one can see the forerunners. One can see who are actually putting some money in where their thought is, or where their mouth is, or however you should do it.
I think it's they put the money where their mouth is. It's inspiring. I hope people follow suit. These are also big actors, so they have sort of say larger footprints to work with, and they have a lot of in-house expertise.
But the shipping industry is also a segmented industry. I mean, there are so many family-owned companies with 5 to 10 ships.
Yeah, and you have so many. I mean, globally, you have so many, like you're saying, smaller family-run companies, and for these people or for these companies to say, "I'm going to be a front runner in digitalization," it's not your day job. It's not what you do. It's not how you make your money and pay the bills every day. So it's good that you have the people who are in the position to do that, and then it's the hope for the future that they will share, in a sense, or it will be an innovation or something that can be implemented in the wide segregation of our business and benefit it as a whole instead of some. There's probably going to be some competitive advantage for some players that are early movers, I think.
Yeah, but I can also see, at least in Sweden, the closest to me, that there are a few second, third or fourth generation ship owners now becoming or being CEOs, and they are 35, 40 years old. They have a completely different mindset than the generation before them. And they have had an education at a foreign university of some kind, and then come back to the family-owned business. And they have got a different perspective on how to do things and what to do and which chances to take, which is probably not the same chances that their parents saw when they were in that age, because it's so different now.
I think that's very true. And it's also about different times. This is going out on a limb here in my personal opinion, but I think that different times need different leaders. I don't think you can have everything. If you have a startup to a mature company, there's so many different ways of the phases of that company as a life. It takes different perspectives, and that's how you get the most out of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
It's our opinion.
I always agree with my guests. That's my dilemma, always. How do you see the future for shipping in general then?
Short term, it's absolutely impossible to say at the moment.
But what are the biggest changes?
I think there's just so much that is changing, and it's if we're talking short term, I think 2017 is going to be very tough. so many markets are struggling at the moment, and there is overcapacity on the supply side in just about anything, and it's a long period of cheap credit, access to cheap credit. And it has created this overcapacity in a number of industries, in commodities and in, you name it, a lot of industries, and it's that's what's creating havoc at the moment. And then we get all these black swan events on the top, which we don't know how will turn out. So now we have a new president in the U.S. That's going to be interesting. So it's and what's going to happen with China in the long run? There is a lot of changes happening, and I think that we will probably see the macroeconomics and the regulation politics side impacting the industry more directly than it has for a while. So this is we'll see what happens, but we have some disruptions. There's a lot of disruptions going on.
Yeah, and I also think about the paradigm which I see is we have a generation shift, because there are a lot of people who won't be here for the next up cycle, and people who usually work until they are 70 plus doesn't do that because the tunnel is long still. They haven't seen the light yet, so they are retiring, and the young people get in, and also this what I see in other industries, the sharing of knowledge. I think I can see that now also in shipping happening, collaborations.
Finally,
yes. And realization of that you can't do everything yourself. You have to share your knowledge. You can do that, and then you can gain something else. And also digitalization, which is my my cup of tea. I think that will also have an effect on shipping. What do you think?
No, I agree with that, and I think we shouldn't be too worried about. It's not a zero-sum game. It might seem like that sometimes, but it's. I think it isn't in all senses of that word. And working together, it's a lot better for that improvement. And if you see, I heard this yesterday from Davos in talking about globalization, and it's always that globalization is working in waves, and it's the question: are we now heading on a downward path of the current wave that we've been in for the past 30, 40 years? And a lot of worries if more protectionism from the US is going to hurt our industry through less globalization. And the fact is, wanting to do better yourself, wanting to make more money for you as a company or for one entity is not a bad thing. The question is, how do you do it? Do you do it on your own, isolated, or do you do it by working together with someone and creating that synergy? That's what I think we're looking at now in this information flow that you're talking about, because it is not possible to get. You can sit here and say, this is my information, this is what I know about my company and these vessels or different things, but unless you get the comparative data from the world fleet, it's you're not going to get the best result. So it is a joint job, and it's one that everyone will benefit from. And it's going to be it's just good for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I think so. And that is what we want to bring to the people who hasn't realized yet that shipping is the place to be. Yeah, that exactly. there are going to be so many interesting jobs.
Not as old-fashioned as our room says.
No, definitely not.
Very modern.
In a way we are. But up until now it has been more about the ship. Yeah. Because that's
the asset.
That is also the state-of-the-art technique is used there, which is interesting. Yeah.
But we have to change minds a bit, in my opinion, and it's you have to be. Which risks are you willing to take? Are you willing to take these risks on completely new innovations? It's not just about innovating time after time, but it's about implementing that in a correct way or a beneficial way. And I think we have been quite a conservative industry. It's known to be that. And I think a lot of people are working very, very hard to change that. and to think differently and to be disruptive and challenging of the status quo. And it's just very exciting. It's a very exciting industry to be in at the moment. There's a lot happening, and I think it's what was my big question when it comes to digitalization is obviously the brokers haven't been working as much or doing as much as on that part as the owners or other elements in the industry. But it was always very interesting. Are we going to be adapters or are we going to be shapers of the solutions that will end up impacting our industry? And I think there's been quite a widespread fear that, or almost acceptance of our industry going to be adapters. And people say this is coming from the outside. Look at Uber. It's always look at Uber or look at Airbnb, and you get that it's coming from the outside. It's going to disrupt our industry. And what we're seeing now is no. So much of it is coming from the inside as well. So there's internal forces that are working on this.
Can you give an example of something disruptive from the inside?
Well, I see different owners. I think especially what Klaveness is doing with K-Lab. I think that's very, very interesting and very exciting. So I had some... we have through Youngship, we have something called Young Environmental Seminar, and K-Lab was presenting Klaveness, last year. So we have green shipping as a topic this year with Yes. So it's I think there's a lot of exciting things going on there.
Youngship, what is that?
Youngship is a organization for young people in shipping. Yeah. So you have started in Bergen in Norway, and there's a branch in Oslo. There's a lot of branches in Norway, and there's a lot of branches in Youngship International. Very likely a branch. If you work, live, and work close to Maritime Hub, there's very likely a branch. And it's a networking organization and a professional input organization, so to speak, and also very social. And if you're young or working in the maritime industry, it's absolutely somewhere to go and spend time.
I get some questions from students or young people trying to get into the industry, trying to either get a job or just to meet people. And I always recommend them to Google Youngship as a start. But do you have any other tip that people could... how do you get into the industry if you're not there?
To be honest, I think it's a very tough industry to get into. And you have to start early. I would recommend people to start doing internships early. Do your thesis with companies. Make contacts. That's how you let people know who you are. And let them know your name and build relationships. You have to put in the time to do that. And even if it's just contacting someone and say, can I come and talk to you about what you work with? You can do that even if you're just in your first year of university. That gives you the constant chance to build relationships. And it makes people remember your name when they see your application. But having said that, it is tough at the moment. So you need an edge.
You need an edge, and you need to have the courage to actually go to these meeting places or conferences for young people and so on, and build your network. Otherwise, maybe shipping is not really for you.
No, exactly. And it's always scary at the beginning, and then it becomes second nature. And I think when you start going to these events and you think, God, I don't know anyone, I'm just going to stand in the corner here and I might leave after 5 minutes because this is very embarrassing. And you realize that most of the other people that are there don't know each other either. They're just so you just walk up to someone and you start talking, and it's
the feeling is mutual.
Terrible.
Everyone
feeling is mutual.
Feels the same thing.
Feeling the same.
So just start by asking, how did you find out about this event?
Yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
a good.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Here am I. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
And everybody's there for the same reason. Everybody's there to meet you in the way that you're there to meet them, and it's. None of these people are there to say, oh, I'd rather not talk to a new person.
No.
Yeah.
Did you have a role model growing up?
I had a role model. I think I had a lot of role models. I've always read a lot of books about female war correspondents. That's sort of been my tough women, and just historic as well. For me, that reading those stories or just the travel and everything. It's always been inspiring in a way, and it's about overcoming challenges and the likes of Martha Gellhorn or these women. Fantastic. Simultaneously, I've thought about a lot of this when it comes to mentorship, because how well you do your job, it's about how hard you work, but it's also about your experience, and you can't rush experience. It comes when it comes, and you have to. I've been very lucky to have a lot of people that are willing to answer my questions when I have them, or that I can have coffee with and said, what do you think about this, and just philosophize about the business and how it works, and been kind enough to share their experience with me, because you can't do anything to rush that. You have to just go out there and be humble and hope that there's someone willing to share what they've learned. And most people are. It's a very I feel there's a lot of passing on of knowledge in this industry. It's a very positive vibe around that. So if you call it coffee, or just call it mentorship, or whatever you call it, it's questions and answers and advice, and it's so important to get. It doesn't even have to be a big age difference. It just have to be a different mindset. It has to be different experience, different road to where you are, and just to get a different thought or train of thought than the one you were having about a specific topic in your mind, and then suddenly you're challenged, and you have to keep doing that.
And also to be confirmed in your thought.
Yeah. As an analyst, that was talking to other analysts. It's so important, I think, to share that and saying, well, I think this, and say, yes, you might be right, but have you thought about that? Oh, that's interesting. Is that something you've seen there? And you just sit there and discuss, and you're so passionate about the subject, and it's. But when you're able to sort of put things together, it's a massive, massive puzzle that everybody has a couple of pieces, and there's no point in sitting there and hogging your pieces and not wanting to share them, because you get to actually see the picture when you join it. It's very fun.
I can see that you're passionate about your job. Who would you be curious to listen to? Who do you think I should interview the next time?
That's a very good question. Maybe I would like to hear from a politician, I think.
About shipping, or
about shipping, about regulations,
or about Middle East, and
no, about maritime trade. There's so many regulations coming on at the moment, and it's even just IMO representative, of someone who can. I think there's a lot of top-down thought at the moment, and when you're sitting in the commercial side, it would be very interesting to hear how the process is there and what we can expect.
Okay.
That would be my preference.
So I will have to pop over to London then again.
Take a trip to that.
I'll do that. Thank you very much, Marthe, for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Marthe. I get all warm inside listening to you. You're so wise, and you're only starting your career. If you want to follow Marthe on Twitter, she is Lamp Marthe, LampMarthe. I have been doing podcasting for a year and a half now. I have released 57 episodes, with 10 more in the bag actually. I have got more than 71,000 downloads in 147 countries, and I have done all of that from my, quote, kitchen table. I find it so interesting and in a way democratic that I could just decide that I wanted to do this and start. I learn from the best, using my network, using in a good way, and just set off into cyberspace. And now this is a success. I am amazed every day, and I'm so grateful both to my guests who take the time to just sit down and talk to me and open up, but also to you listeners who subscribe, listen, give me feedback, and makes me shine in a way I never expected. I'm really grateful, and it's so much fun. I really enjoy this. I have put a lot of work and money into getting this going. Now I get a lot of requests for everything. from speaking gigs to coaching how to produce a podcast, in giving classes, and things you would never imagine. So I have my thinking cap on. I want to accept all these exciting offerings I get, but continuing with the shipping podcast because that is so rewarding and it's definitely something I am passionate about. But in the meantime, I have to provide income to do so. So right now, I wish every day had 48 hours. But which entrepreneur do not wish for that? I have started to gather voices for celebrating my 2-year anniversary, which will be on the 31st of July this year. If you want to contribute to this, please let me know. If you or your company would like to be a sponsor or a collaborator, there is a media kit on the website shippingpodcast.com. I tried to keep it updated, but things are happening so fast now, so I think it's actually more than 1 month old, and so many things have happened since then, but you will find it there. I'm also thinking about maybe opening a Patreon account. If you don't know what that is, please Google Patreon. But I haven't come around to it. There are so many things I need to do now. So I will leave you now. I got lots of things on my plate, as you hear. I also got a newsletter to produce. You can subscribe to that one, also on the shippingpodcast.com, and I will try and give you a little bit more about what's happening behind the scenes. So, until the next time, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast where the maritime professionals are talking about their everyday job.